Yeah, my slides fall. That's all that's.
They're good for you.
But there's.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Go ahead and grab some pizza in the back. I think we're gonna have students coming and going, but we're gonna get started in maybe 1 minute. So if you want to grab a drink and some pizza throughout the presentation, feel free to head out to the restrooms. If you go out to the right and around, you'll see there's 2 restrooms there. But feel free to come and go throughout, and we'll get started in just 1 minute. Just kidding. I'm going to share my story. Yeah, dang. We can sit front row. Sit front row. Okay. Look how bare it is. Look, it's scary. I don't want to. So long. I'm kidding. You know how.
Which left or right?
We'll make the panelists feel better.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Yeah, if you all want to scope, you don't have to. If you want to scope, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, we don't bite. Oh, sorry, I can't speak for everyone on this panel.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for coming today to an event focused on exploring the realities of international research. So today you all will have an opportunity to learn from 3 William & Mary students, as well as 2 William & Mary faculty who have experience doing research in international settings about their own experiences, what their sort of preconceived notions were around doing international research, and then the reality and lessons learned through their experience. So in today's session, I'm going to start with just giving you just a general overview of some of the research opportunities here at the College of William & Mary, and specifically within the Institute for Integrative Conservation, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we'll have an opportunity to hear from our panelists. We have a series of questions that we have asked them to reflect on related to sort of their motivations for doing international research, lessons learned about doing international research, and then also some questions around the logistics. What is it like navigating airports, changing money, navigating new environments, coming home, dealing with visas, other logistical aspects of doing research and participating in education in international settings. And then we'll make sure that there's opportunity for you all to ask our panelists questions. The goal really of this session is to provide William & Mary students interested in either expanding their international education or research experience, or who are interested in embarking on new international education and research experiences. So we really want this to be tailored to you all. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have. There are no silly questions about doing work in an international setting. This is really meant for you. And it's meant to be sort of an informal discussion with our panelists here who have had recent and unique experiences in international settings. My name is Erica Garud. I'm the Director of Research for the Institute for Integrative Conservation, or the IIC, here at the College of William & Mary. What we do is we try to find ways that William & Mary students and faculty can work with external conservation partners here in Virginia, across the US, and international settings to work on applied research projects that meet a need for those partners that help advance integrative conservation outcomes. So today we have several students that have been involved in conservation research with the IIC. They're going to reflect on their own unique experiences through this program working on international research with partners in international settings. And 2 faculty members that have been mentors on projects through the IIC. But we're going to ask our panelists to reflect on research experiences they've had, international experiences they've had even outside of the IIC. Especially our faculty have done a lot of research in different settings and different topics and different disciplines. So you'll have an opportunity to hear not only about their experience in the Conservation Research Program in the IIC, but also their experience more broadly. So in an increasingly interconnected world, it's important for us all to reflect and build global perspectives. A global perspective is the ability really to think beyond our own context, to consider the implications of our decisions and actions on different stakeholders, communities, cultures, and environments. While, building your global perspective, you certainly build up skills. It really is a practice. It's a practice of self-reflection on the factors that shape the ways in which we see the world. It's an openness and an eagerness to learn from people and new cultures and new environments and from different perspectives. It's an intentional practice of understanding our own position and the ways in which we impact the environment and people around us. It's an exploration of how we're all interconnected with our environment and each other. And really at the core of a global perspective is a respect for the diversity of communities, cultures, and perspectives in our world. Really honing the practice of self-reflection and of global perspective is really critical for us as learners, as researchers, as students really of the world, really trying to better understand the ways in which we all interact with the environment and with each other. And it is really through these international experiences that we have an opportunity to see our own homes, our own culture, and ourselves in new ways. So we're really lucky because here at William & Mary, we have an incredible privilege of having the support and resources to get to travel internationally and to participate in education and research experiences in international settings. And we're even more privileged that we have incredible partners in international settings who have invited us to come and learn with them about new different ways of learning about the world and connecting with the world. And so because we have such an incredible opportunity here as students and as faculty and as staff at William & Mary to really be hosted by these international partners to learn about ourselves and new ways of viewing the world, it really is our responsibility to do the self-reflection needed to make sure that we're respectful and responsible researchers and travelers. So that really is sort of the basis of our conversation today, is how we build up that practice in ourselves in order to ensure that we are effective and respectful researchers and travelers. Briefly, there are many ways as William & Mary students, especially, that you can get involved in international education and research. If you haven't done so already, I would definitely suggest connecting with the Reed Center. They're really the hub here on campus for international experiences for students. They have study abroad opportunities. They have a repository of a ton of different research opportunities and educational experiences for students. And they just launched this new website, the William & Mary International Career Series, which basically is a page on their website where they house all the various deadlines and opportunities on campus for students to learn about international careers or to participate in international research, or for fellowships or scholarships that would enable students to do international research or education. So definitely check out that site if you're interested in doing some international research or going internationally to participate in some sort of educational experience while you're here at William & Mary. And then briefly, I mentioned the Institute for Integrative Conservation's year-long conservation research program. You're going to hear from 3 students who are currently in the program, but this is a really great way for William & Mary students to get an opportunity to work with international partners on an applied research project that was proposed by external partners as needed to advance their conservation outcomes. The deadline to apply for our next year-long program is Monday, October 21st, but don't worry, the application is not too bad. It's basically filling out a survey through Qualtrics that asks you to reflect on why you're interested in the program and what skills you bring to the program and what projects you might be interested in. And then just to upload a very brief video explaining why you're motivated to participate in the program. So I'll stick around after today's session if you're interested in learning more about the research program, or if you have any questions about the application process. But that's a really great way to get involved in international research, get an opportunity to really hone your skills as an international researcher in a year-long program that really has a focus on conservation solutions. So now we get a chance to hear from our incredible students and faculty about their own unique experiences working in international settings, specifically on research. And so I have a set of questions that I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to first ask our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll go down and have you each introduce yourself. So your name, maybe your major, your year, and then for the students briefly, if you don't mind reflecting and sharing a little bit about some of your international research experience. And the faculty, if you don't mind sort of briefly summarizing a little bit about your very recent international research experiences, that would be good. Then we'll start with some of the questions. We'll go ahead and start with you, Asha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Asha. I'm currently a sophomore. I'm double majoring in public policy and environmental science. In terms of like my international research experience, this is mainly it. I went to Kenya this summer, Amboseli, Kenya. So like if you know Mount Kilimanjaro, I woke up like every morning with a view. Like that was incredible. But that's kind of like the region I was working in. I was working with an indigenous population there called the Maasai, and specifically Maasai women, to help develop their entrepreneurial models. Outside of this current project, I also worked in India, where I worked on in a farm. We're learning about how agriculture and humans kind of intertwine with one another. So,
hi everyone, I'm Raquel. I am a current senior and I'm a double major in integrative conservation and sociology. And my project went to Ecuador for 2 weeks over the summer. That was what that picture with it's on it was on the screen. And this is the only time I've had like real research, but I grew up as a foreign service kid, so my father was a diplomat. So I moved around abroad my life. So this was a really good experience to be able to like go to a place I hadn't been before and kind of experience it in a different way, other than, you know, living there or going for a vacation. So it's a really cool opportunity. Yeah, I'll love to talk more about it after.
Hi, I'm Liam. I'm a senior. I study integrative conservation and international relations. My primary international research experience has also been with the IIC, assessing local perspectives on human carnivore conflict. I was lucky enough to get to travel there this summer under Professor Lohani to conduct interviews in person. I also am working in a research lab that's focused on studying responses of environmental NGOs, democratic backsliding in the Republic of Georgia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sapna Lohani. I'm the geospatial data scientist here at the IIC. I'm from Nepal. My background is environmental science. My PhD was in natural resources, University of Arizona. I am an international, so I have a lot of international experiences of living in a foreign country. I did my master's in natural resource management from Thailand. I spent there for 2 years. Then I moved to US in 2009, so it has already been almost 15 years now. My research experiences so far, in addition to the human-wildlife conflict research that Jan just mentioned, I'm with the Nepal Water Initiative. This is also a project in Nepal where the multidisciplinary teams from William and Mary are working on different aspects of river watershed management. It has a fishery component, which is the ecological component. It has a community component, which is mostly seen by me. Then there is a geospatial component, there is an economic component, there is a religious component. So different multidisciplinary project where 2 years of
Julius Odhiambo, Assistant Professor of Public Health, Department of Physiology and Health Sciences. My research mainly focuses on maternal and child health outcomes. I try to understand their vulnerabilities, what is driving their disparities, in order for us to be able to intervene equitably on policy relevant thresholds. So over the past few years, we've been working in Kenya. We've been having an active site in Narok, that is the western part of Kenya, where we've been trying to assess the vaccination trends among the Maasais, incorporating their unique cultural contexts in order for us to fully understand why we have all these disparities. So I also have some active projects in Narok, and also currently we are trying to come up with another project in Nepal where we just want to also analyze maternal mortality outcomes in the region in Nepal, and I'm working with the students here. So I'm so delighted to be here and looking forward to.
The first question is, what motivated you to participate in international research? And what were some of your preconceived ideas about what international research is like? Maybe start with you, Asha, again, if you.
Yeah, no, of course. For me personally, I'm very interested in international anything. Like that's just kind of what I want to do in the future. I'm very interested in international like environmental law, so working with treaties and just like inner boundary like in different countries. So this project was very interesting to me just because I had the opportunity to travel internationally and go to a place that I'd never been before. I'd love to travel. It's one of my favorite things to do. So that's kind of really what motivated me to apply to this project, especially considering that it was like, not only did I get to travel, but it also related to, and the environment and conservation and just kind of everything that I want to do in the future was like encapsulated into this one project. So it kind of like landed perfectly. In terms of preconceived ideas, I've done international travel before. So like I said, I've lived in India. I travel there like every other year. And so I know that like it's really important to keep an open mind when you're doing international anything, just traveling, and especially in terms of research. But I think something I just wasn't entirely prepared for or really shocked by was just how different culture in Kenya was, and specifically with the Maasai, than it is here in the Western world. We just have very different kind of mindsets and how we kind of interpret life. And it was fascinating to see just like how kind of their mindset worked and how different it is from my own. So it's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. So I applied to like all of my CRP's projects that I ranked were international because I really wanted to do when I was international. Well, I didn't want to study abroad like for a semester while I was here because I've lived abroad, but I really wanted to still have the like educational experience abroad. That makes sense. So this was kind of like the perfect crossroads of like not being a whole semester in another place, but still having that like interaction. And I actually had never been to Ecuador, but I have been to a lot of countries in the region. So that was like very interesting to be able to go there. And I think like regarding research specifically, again, I've never had the experience of like kind of doing this kind of travel like an academic way. I've lived there or like went for vacation to like learn on my own, but not like in a school environment. So I think like this was my first opportunity for that, and it was really cool experience to be able to kind of, it's like you'll see if you, and I talk about this later, but like being able to do a project in the spring, start the project and go and in the field and see it actually happening in real time and like talking to people who are actually doing the work. It's very meaningful. And I guess I didn't really initially realize how powerful that would be or how it would feel. I was like, oh, like a lot of the stuff we're doing is, online. So, I mean, how much can it really, right? But it really made a huge difference. So I guess I should bring a little bit more background in my project. I'm working with a nonprofit called Rainforest Trust, and they're global, and they essentially fund protected areas in regions that are like tropical and have rainforests. So they're very like land-based management, and they have several partners around the world that are kind of like smaller organizations that are local in those areas. So we specifically had our Rainforest Trust, and then we had two partners, Ecomingo and Hogotogo, which were from Ecuador. So we worked, when we went to Ecuador, we visited both of those partners in whatever designated some of their protected areas or reservations. So it was very cool to be able to like do, you know, like I said, do a project and then go and talk to them about it. And like we did stuff with the IUCN Red List, which I can explain more at some other time, but basically we had to like write draft assessments for new species, and we were able to go and see the species like in the wild and see their monitoring efforts. We got to go to the plant nursery. It was just really cool. So I think it just like really broadens like your mind, and like I don't know how to explain it, but like it's just a really great experience, and it will be different for everyone, but it's just so cool to be able to like have a hands-on like experience with it.
Different than if you were going on a vacation or
Yeah.
going for some other purpose, you know, it's, you're part of those organizations, you're invited by those organizations and those communities to come and learn, so it's totally different.
Sure. Like everyone else, I've always been interested in learning new things about the world. I've always been interested in history and geography, international systems and systems and actors across national boundaries is a big focus in my coursework through my international relations studies. But even in conservation, I think one of the most important lessons I've learned is that even problems down at the local and interpersonal level and solutions are shaped by international actors and international systems. So I was excited for this opportunity to travel because I knew that research in an international setting would better prepare me to study problems and build this in the future. Also just obviously an opportunity to meet people and learn a lot as well. Going into the research was definitely a bit of a blank slate in terms of preconceived notions, but I did have the opportunity to take a course on South Asian history before conducting this research, and I think one of the most important things I learned from that is just I learned how much I didn't know, and so I went into the experience knowing I would be surprised no matter how much literature I reviewed and how much I prepared. It's definitely how it played out in the field, but a great experience.
I think we have covered most of the points. My motivation for national research, travel, obviously, and right now most of my projects are in Nepal, so because it's my own country. It was easy to start projects over there, easy to take students over there. But like I said, I have work experience in Southeast Asia, which is a different culture than where I was brought up from. But learning from these communities, the hands-on, because when we go to these sites for a couple of weeks, I think it's not enough. We need more, but having that 4 to 6 weeks is much, much better than not having that experience. Going there, seeing by yourself how they live. Of course, what we have thought or planned for that research, sitting here in wherever, from not being in that place remotely is so different from being there, waking up in that place, seeing firsthand how conservation is done, what their lifestyle is, how they go in the morning to the river and start fishing is different from what we have thought when we designed the project. So these kind of changes that we can see, what Raquel said is, it's really interesting. So I really want to take the students, not just from here, from anywhere, or to bring the students from Nepal or from other countries to the US and see a different side of same conservation that we are talking about. That's my motivation for international research.
Ideally, for me, I think like being in public health, I think the world is a global village. The challenges that exist at the local level, at the community level, could be similar to what exists maybe here in Virginia. So when you talk about maternal mortality, there could be some counties here that have a disproportionate number. So by understanding what is driving this in another setting could also be, help us to address the same challenge here. So for me, I think international research is all about going to places where we can try to get solutions in order to make the world a more healthy place, to make everybody more safe, and also to bring outcomes that are more sustainable. When it comes to preconceived ideas, I could say specifically, originally I'm from Kenya and my studies in Kenya. So one challenge or maybe a preconception is that, if you're based in a high income country and you're doing research in a low income country, you just have to balance that aspect. Because the way people perceive you coming from a high income country, sometimes it might be that you want to dominate that space, that research space. So when I go and do my research, maybe in another country, I try to balance out and do things in a way that, is going to accommodate, some of these aspects that, might be inherent to the people I'm interacting with.
That's actually a perfect transition into my next question, which I'll start with Professor Adeyhambo and Professor Wilhani for this one. Is when you first start doing research, how do you sort of do the internal self-reflection full context, enough to understand your own position and the potential power imbalances that might exist for international researchers working alongside on the research? If you reflect a little bit on that, how do we reflect and learn about our own position? And then how do we navigate power imbalances or differences maybe in you're doing work in international setting? Maybe start with you, Professor Adeyhambo, since you were reflecting on this in your last answer.
Absolutely. So I think that one aspect that we need to do first is to acknowledge that privilege exists. That you're coming from a high income country. Most of the time as you do your research, you're moving to a low income country. Or maybe in my context, that's what happens. So I'm coming from the United States. I'm going to Kenya, I'm working with partners in Rwanda. So I need to accept that I'm coming from a privileged position. Now, privilege can take various forms. In other words, maybe you have the time to travel to go and do research. Perhaps they don't have the time. Maybe your education level is higher than the people you're working with. That could be a factor. Or maybe you're more informed. Maybe you have more resources to do that kind of a research. So for them even to think about it tends to be a difficult thing. So it's paramount, or maybe important for you to acknowledge that. And that could bring an aspect of humility and respect. How you act in research is also important, with the understanding that you're coming from a position of privilege. So that is maybe what I'd want to say. And then also when we want to balance this power dynamics, another thing that I think about is, how best can we collaborate to leverage the various strengths that we have. So you could be coming with the resources, but also they also have other resources that can be useful for your study. So one thing that you need to do is you need to find ways of balancing that so that you can always, get favorable outcomes that improve, the lives of the population.
For you, Professor Adeyhambo, so you do a lot of work with communities in Kenya, and not like the work in Nepal will involve obviously communities as well. So as an international researcher, what is our responsibility then to those communities related to the work that you're doing?
I think the first thing also, you have to be accountable to the community, and also to try to see that, acknowledge their role in the study, or maybe acknowledge their role in the research. In other words, if you think about a study and then you publish a paper, you don't even acknowledge this community. That is what is called epistemic injustice, where you go to a place, you do a research, then you dominate every conversation. It's more like you're an expert. And you forget about the indigenous knowledge that these people could do things. So I think one thing that we need to do is to, collaborate, to be able to do things that also are going to sustain that partnership. In other words, it's not like a one-time event. So if you do a study in Kenya, if you do a study in Nepal, you're able to create systems that can enable and empower this community to continue doing what can enable them, to be healthy in my view. So, those are some of the things that I'd want to point out.
Well, actually, you touched upon a very good point about privilege, and that is so important. I agree to that completely. Most of my works has been focused on using the techniques of GIS or environment science or natural resources, but my research has always been in areas where there is a conflict of resource management and where human dimensions are involved. So we are trying to advocate that we need to preserve the environment. We need to preserve these resources. Don't reduce, try to reuse things so that we can save it for the younger generation. But at the end, it is the people, the human dimension of which we have to be very careful about, because they are responsible for the resources. We are going from privileged area, telling people what to do with the resources that they are. We are designing the research. The data collection technique is ours. The science that behind it, which we think that we are really privileged about the information, is something that is going from our head. The sites that we are selecting is ours. So everything is from our side. That is where the power dynamics of taking a research from this setting to a different, it can be a developing world, it can be a different setting that we are taking the project. But now when we are reaching out to these communities, we have to understand the dynamics over there. First, we reach out to someone, exactly what you said here, we have to reach out to the communities there. We have to understand the dynamics over there as well. We will find someone we knew over there for collaboration. They will find out the structure of the community over there, because there is a diversity of gender. Maybe we are going to a community where females don't even talk to the international people who are asking all these uncomfortable questions. We might be going the areas where only we are focusing on one part of the community, which we shouldn't be. So the way I look at these power dynamics and the way I have seen with a couple of my collaborations where we have tried to set up a similar model of researcher and students from here to collab with a similar team where we have a researcher from a local area who knows the area more than myself, because I left the country so many years back, or to have similar kind of model and students from Cambodia where they are working in a different component of the project, where they can mingle together, know each other, respect each other, trust each other, to where it might be in terms of data collection, it might be in terms of the knowledge that we have. Yes, we might have more scientific knowledge, which we are trying to add to the project, but the local knowledge, which will come from the local people over there. So we need to respect that and give equal balance to these two knowledge. Another thing which I was thinking with this question is, when we are doing research, we are scientifically connected to the question. We are very much looking at that science behind it, that mechanics behind that research. But when we go out in the field and talk to the people, we start getting emotionally connected to them. So when we are collecting the data, if someone is speaking what we are thinking about the topic, we try to get biased to those responses more, because they are speaking our mind. We need to be very careful on detaching ourselves from the scientific framework as well as from the emotional biasness in the ground. So being that neutral eye to the research is very difficult. And I think we are still learning. It comes with practice, and it changes with every opportunity of this, because the communities are different. Again, we are learning from each and every communities we go. We are learning from each and every research So like you said, is from each and every travel, we learn something else. So having that connection, but again, detaching yourself from the biasness is the balance to work with this dynamics of research.
Thank you both. I want to open up to the three students. If you reflect, if you want to, on sort of your own experience and your own practice when you were traveling internationally, and really reflecting on sort of your own sort of viewpoints and how those viewpoints have been shaped in your own position as a William and Mary student on your projects. No pressure, but if you want to provide a brief reflection on that experience, what it was like to reflect on your own position as a William and Mary student in an international setting.
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I definitely think that privilege and unconscious biases are an important thing at play, and coming as an undergraduate student, at least in my case, with relatively limited international experience, there were going to be surprises and unconscious biases that have the potential to be harmful and affect your research. I think one thing that can minimize the harmful effects of some of those biases is just maintaining an attitude of gratitude. But gratitude in a lot of ways to the institution, William and Mary, for helping you with that research, to the conservation partners for allowing you to participate and learn from them as someone who's learning about both the research process and the local context. And also to the communities, in our case, that we were interviewing and giving us their time. Just keeping in mind that this is a learning experience, especially as an undergraduate student. Being thankful for that, I guess.
Attitude of gratitude. We're making shirts after this. And a bumper sticker. Thanks, Liam. You all want to
Sure. Well, I wasn't in Ecuador for nearly as long as they were on their trips, but and I also have a lot of international experience and a lot of experience with South American and Central American culture. I speak Spanish as well, so that was really helpful for me to kind of already like not have biases necessary, but kind of know what to expect. Of course, there's always going to be something that's a little different, but I feel like, at least for me, like I felt really comfortable being in Ecuador, being with the people, because I kind of, already like have interacted with people of similar cultures. But I still learned a lot. And I think it's really important to like go with a really open mind and kind of go with the flow, which can be kind of difficult sometimes, especially if you have to like collect certain data by this time. But it's really about like, in the end, you're gonna get what you can get. But the most important part is also like, I think, is having this collaboration and these like relationships, and it's like really important to kind of prioritize that. So getting to know them, if they want to, like on a more personal level, talking about other things, asking them what they got involved with. I got to talk a lot with this worker. He focuses on the magnolia species, which is what we did our projects on in Okotoco, and I got to hear his whole like life story and how he grew up in a small village and how he's studying and how much knowledge he's acquired from these trees, and just kind of also learning about the completely different like upbringing of these people, and like how a lot of them have, like, at least from my experience, have very specific knowledge that is just something you can't just learn in a classroom. And so that was like really interesting, and just like you just have to kind of just be open-minded, and like there'll be so many lessons and things that you didn't expect. And maybe like, not the textbook, for research thing, but like I think you can get a lot from that as well.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize the importance of keeping an open mind. Obviously, we're outsiders coming into a new space and a new culture and a new environment that likely we haven't experienced before. And I mean, like, especially for me, like I've never been to Kenya or Africa at all, so I had no kind of understanding of the culture of it before. And I think it's also important that no matter how much preliminary research you do, that doesn't make you an expert in that culture and in that kind of region. Like pretty much the entire spring semester is you gathering background information on your project and looking at different kind of primary sources. But that almost all kind of gets thrown out the window the minute you arrive in that country because you're almost like a sponge and like essentially everything that you do the minute you land in that country, you just need to learn as much as you can and observe everything that you can while you're there. And that's just even outside of your research. I learned so much about just like conservation outside of the women that I interviewed for my project. I mean, just even from Arthur the chef, like we had a private chef who would cook us all of our meals, and he would like show us how to cook Kenyan cultural food and like how to be sustainable and how to harvest from the gardens and things like that. So I learned just an immense amount of information about conservation, about, international research and their culture. And I think it was really incredible because it's something that like you cannot do by just going on a vacation. Because like you can go on a vacation and, for me specifically, I was in a hot touristy area. I was right next to Mount Kilimanjaro. I was right next to Amboseli National Park. So there was all of the amazing animals, lions, giraffes, zebras, all of that. And so like going and traveling there is one thing, but being a part of these projects, you are literally thrown in and immersed into the culture. And I think that's like one of my favorite parts about being able to do this project is it's an experience that you're not going to be able to get kind of not doing research.
That actually is a perfect transition. You all are perfect at this, just leading into the next question. So now I'd like you to reflect on what it's like to live and work in an international setting, as Asha mentioned, which is often very different from what you're used to, right? You're living, eating new food, the travel is different, the language is different, the culture is different, all the things are different. Even the things that you think might be the same are different in a different setting. For many of, at least for the Conservation Research Program, there's a variety of experiences and field conditions that the students are a part of. Everything from students camping and staying in tents in more of a remote area, which I just want to briefly mention that Asha mentioned a private chef, but Asha was staying in a field station in remote Kenya. So it was a private chef, but at a field station who we can talk more about that in a minute, but there's a variety of settings. We're not staying at any luxury resorts. You're staying in field settings, in hotels, in the settings where the work is being done. So there's a variety of conditions, but in all cases, it's going to be different from what you're used to. So would you all mind briefly reflecting on how do you live and work and adapt to settings, especially when you're being invited and hosted by those communities to come and live the way that they've been living, but also recognize that it's a little bit different for you and you're going to have to adjust, that things are going to be slightly different from what you're used to. So how do you balance that sort of the need to feel comfortable with obviously the fact that you're invited to live in a new way and to a new way of living? Asha, maybe since you talked about your experience, maybe starting.
Yeah, I think for me, I would have been open to literally doing anything. If you gave me just a mat and was like, you're sleeping here for the next month, I would have been so okay with that. So actually, like, even though it was a remote field station, I think our accommodations were more than fair. We had our own tents, our own desks and beds and bathrooms. So like when it's showing up and having seen that, I was like, wow, this is actually so much nicer than I was expecting. Like I was beyond happy. And I think a big part of it was like the organization that was hosting us and that we were working with, Amboseli Ecosystem Trust, was the most hospitable people I've ever met. I mean, we arrive and they have already baked us a cake and they don't have an oven. So how they bake a cake, I actually learned how to do that. It's with sand. I baked a cake while I was there, but they like baked a cake for us and had decorated it with like welcome, like William and Mary students. They were just like so warming and welcoming to us. And you can really tell that they were wanting us to be there and excited to have us there for the next month. So I think a lot of just like the kind of anxieties of living in a new place, like without my family and living with 3 other students and in the middle of nowhere, was kind of relieved having like that, the kind of, what is it? Just the company of our partner organization that like pretty much anything that I wanted, I knew that they would do anything that they could to take care of it for me. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't like all sunshine and rainbows either. There was a lot of days we didn't have water, so we were showering with like a bottle of water jug that we just had to like pour over our heads. Like energy wasn't really accessible all the time because everything is solar powered. So if it was a cloudy day, there's no energy, there's no service. Service was a really kind of tough thing to get a hold of as well. I barely talked to my parents the entire month just because like I was in the middle of nowhere. The generator that they did have and they turned on for 2 hours in a day was broken half the time. So there are definitely obstacles that you can overcome. But overall, I think just like it was actually really nice to not have that generator be working and not talk to my parents. I mean, obviously I miss them, but that forced me to honestly just be offline. And every night my friends and I, we would watch the stars and like see the Milky Way, and it was gorgeous. Like because we were in the middle of nowhere, it was like pitch black outside. We could, really just connect with one another on a deeper level. So I think just kind of overall summing it up, it definitely, there was a lot of anxiety for me, especially like going off onto this place alone as like freshly 18 years old. However, just like having the people next to me, having William and Mary that I know like would keep me safe, and having our partner organization Amicilla Ecosystem Trust with me really kind of alleviated all of that stress.
Maybe I'll ask for maybe 2 more reflections and we'll shift to just given time. Yeah, so maybe just 2 more volunteers to reflect on this. If you want to go, Raquel, go ahead.
Oh, I can go just because I had a really different experience internationally. Well, again, like I said, mine was only 2 weeks. And we did a lot of moving around. We weren't in like one spot for the whole time. We had a variety of accommodations from, first staying in an airport hotel in Quito to like staying in cabins at the reserve to staying at like this hotel thing. I don't even know how to explain it, in this other area that was in a more touristy area of Ecuador. Spent a lot of time with taxi drivers and van drivers, but they were all very, very friendly in my experience. So it was never a dull moment. But yeah, just being flexible in general is really important. And I want to talk about food because that's important too. So for us, especially the first leg of the trip, we were very limited. Like we didn't really have options. We kind of like the private chef idea. There was chefs who made the food for like all the field workers, and then you just eat what they gave you. We were able to, provide them any dietary restrictions beforehand, and they were very accommodating for that and like very thoughtful. But yeah, so you really don't just pick everything like all the time. You be able to pick everything. So I recommend packing snacks. If one day you really don't want to eat something or it doesn't feel good or something like that. And depending on where you are, this is something like that happened to me as well, but like it's very common to get sick from the food. So talking to doctors beforehand, you need like antibiotics, stuff like that. Ecuador was really easy to get antibiotics. Not all countries are like that, but just kind of having almost like a worst case scenario plan beforehand. And the IIC really supports you with that. You have to like fill out all these forms of like who your emergency contacts are, like doctors, all that stuff. But yeah, like making sure you have the vaccines that you need is important, but all of that is like you don't have to do it on your own is basically what I'm trying to say. Like if you don't know how to do things, there's always going to be someone to help you. And there's always someone who will have an answer for you. So that really shouldn't be a big like barrier, I think. But yeah.
You can go. I was planning to talk on the food part and cover, so you can go if you have.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of add to what has been said, is when we are in a new environment, I think we also need to reflect on our actions and our assumptions and also our expectations. Because, you're going to a community where, like you're saying, they don't have any one source of power. Maybe they generate only once for 2 hours. So what do you do in such circumstance? So I think, again, it's like you need to be open-minded. And also you need to learn to unlearn. In other words, like if there are things you used to do, then maybe that's the moment to maybe do things differently in a way that also accommodates the different aspects of the community. And then also you need also to reflect. You need also to reflect on what you might need to do to make this community comfortable. If you find them sleeping on a mat, so you don't wanna somebody who is criticizing what they normally do, but also just finding a way of accommodating that aspect, because both ways they might be seeing some challenges in you and also be seeing some challenges in them. So it's more about being open to feedback, accommodating, and also trying to learn how to live with these new friends that you have.
A bunch of bumper stickers coming out of this. Learn to unlearn, I think, is a really important thing. People live in different ways, and if it's different from what we're used to in Williamsburg, that doesn't mean that it just means that it's a different way of living. And so really practicing that eagerness to learn and that openness, and acknowledging also how your nonverbal communication, what that communicates as well. So briefly, I would ask maybe 2 more questions. So maybe have 2 of you reflect on this one. Living and working in different cultures and working in international setting requires flexibility. How do you practice that flexibility and openness in your travel while also wanting to achieve something? In your cases, you're trying to collect data for research. How do you balance the flexibility that we've been talking about required of doing international work with also wanting to come up with a deliverable? Professor Diambo or Lohani, do you mind starting first with the reflection on flexibility in a research setting?
Thank you for this question. This is very important, and we have witnessed this firsthand last year when we went to the study location with 90+ questions. And then on the first 2 days, 90+ questions were not supposed to be for all the study areas, but we had to choose based on where we go. But in the first 2 days, we realized even 30 questions, we are not going to finish in 30 minutes and talking to people. So all these, our survey questions that we are trying to ask our respondents, they are giving us time from their busy schedule. So we should not aim for more than 30 minutes, and we have to be very grateful for their time that they are giving to us. It might be squeezing this time from their eating schedule or job or whatever it is. So we had to completely change the question so that it matches with our respondents or the site we are going. So we need to have that flexibility in our research to get the same objectives, but by changing the questions a bit, or it is maybe by changing the structure of the flow of the questions, or it might be asking the same question in a different way. So this kind of flexibility we witness. One aspect of the flexibility component we witnessed ourselves in our research last year. So we need to have this flexibility in our mind that things will change. Things can change, and if we are going to an international setting, things will change. I can guarantee that things will change. So we need to be very open about accepting those changes that is going to come in our pre-planned schedule or our activity that we think will be done. And another thing is, depending on the place that I went, climate plays a big factor in changing the duration of the time that we want to spend for our research. So we need to have that buffer time for, it can be in terms of time for travel. It can be in terms of, like, I think someone said, there will be days when you go out in the field for data collection and you don't come back till 5 p.m. And I think Erica is one of the witness who had their food after 12, 13 hours and then cried for the first sip. We just have to reflect. And again, when we were talking about food, I was remembering our incidents with him in the field where, so, I mean, we are eating the same, in Nepal, we eat rice so much. We don't even ask the students, what do you want to eat? We just by default thought that they will be okay with eating the same food. And sometimes we used to forget that there is some food which does not work with some of our students. So, making, even it took us some days to understand or to remember that, oh, we have someone for whom we need to think ahead of time before ordering the food. And we used to even go to place where they don't have any access to market for months. So we are going to these kind of houses where the people are willing to spend another 1 hour or so to cook. It might be the most privileged food for them, which they might cook for just festivals, but they cook it for us. So even being open to that, and if we are spending time in that particular house, it took 2 hours of our travel time, which we had not even thought about. We were planning to reach to one destination in maybe 6 p.m. in the evening, and then we had adjust our schedule. So having these kind of logistic schedule, or also there were some places where we planned to stay for a week, but when we went there, we thought, we figured out that the accommodation was not good enough for us for another 6 or 7 days to live there as 4 different researchers trying to meet people, maybe because we thought that the population was large enough that we'll find enough households. The population had already migrated, and we are not going to find out even 2% of the population that we wanted. So now we have to choose a different site. So having these logistic difficulties are always going to be there. So we need to be very, very flexible with this. And one way to deal with this is to find the right partner. Because having those people from the ground who know the field, who know the people, sometimes we would just catch our respondents on their way to the pasture land, or on their way to their school, or on their way to some hospital. So having those connections who know the area is the key to deal with these kind of flexibilities and the hurdles that can come up with our logistics when we build.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And I think in your response, it was a good reminder, Dr. Lahani, that you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to know everything about yourself or your position or the culture. It's just coming in with that respect and desire to learn from each other, from the host. You're learning as much as you can from your hosts about their culture and the way they see the world, how they live their lives. And they're learning from you, as Dr. Lahani said as well, around, whether you eat rice every day or like that every day. So it's really that openness to learn from one another that's rooted in respect that really, I think, is the key. It's the attitude is gratitude. So my last question for each of the panelists, and then we'll open it up to all of you, and it'll be more informal, so you can grab pizza, and as we sort of discussed with the panelists, is what do you wish that you had known about international research or careers prior to your experience? I know some of you reflected on this a little bit at the beginning, but if you were in the position maybe of some of the students in the audience here who are interested in embarking on an international research project, what do you wish that you had known? Maybe start with our faculty panelists first. Do you mind starting, Namba?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wish I'd have known before, my career, is that the local community are credible producers of knowledge. So as you move to the local community, it's not like they don't know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe how it is defined according to their way, different formats. So that is one thing. But communities are credible producers of knowledge. They understand the phenomenon better than you could ever do. And also something that I've learned along the way is that as we do research, we need to break down the dependency. In other words, we need to make our what we do more sustainable. By having a community tax, intentional action in order to address the challenges that we do. So if you're doing a community engagement, community-led research, so it is such a disaster for you to leave without having structures in which these people can still do in order to maybe promote more healthy living or whatever you are doing. So I felt like most of the time we could go to a place, do whatever we are doing. But the moment we leave that place, that's the end of the story. So I learned that perhaps the best way to do it is just to plan ahead and have initiatives that will keep the community engaged, even for the long term, in order to fully address some of the challenges that we face.
Oh, this is a very hard question. I wish I had known I wish I could take so many students again, because it's a research. It's again learning from both sides. So I wish I knew many other ways to engage the students from this side of this table, and then from the other side. But I wish I knew other ways to connect. Would be my first thing that would come to my mind, because yeah, in most of the ways I have been working in research, I have been connecting with, so that people's sentiment always there when I'm working in any research. So I wish I had known different ways to connect with the people, would be the only thing that comes to mind.
Sure. I think this was one thing that I didn't know, but I wish I had better internalized. I guess is really just the value of communication within your team. It's really important to be on the same page with other members of your team, both for the actual work that you're doing, and also just maintaining like a good working environment and dynamic. Like in our example, we were conducting interviews in 2 teams, and we found out at least part of the way through conducting surveys, there were a few questions where the teams have been asking a question in a slightly different way and getting slightly different responses as a result. So I think just making sure that you are really on the same page with who you're working with, and a constant kind of flow of communication. And I think part of that communication is also knowing when to ask for help. I wish it's something I had internalized more. One thing going into the research that I was self-conscious about was not wanting to be a burden. As an undergraduate student and an outsider, right? Like, you're not providing any like great technical knowledge. Like, you're here to be adaptable and learn, and you want to make a contribution. But you can't make a contribution if you're not, there are problems. In my case, an allergy to lentils, which I had not known about beforehand. But you have to communicate these needs to your team and know that they care about you and want you to be working to the best of your ability. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because your team cares about you.
Yeah, I have learned over my short time in William and Mary that students here don't like to ask for help. Please ask for help. We are not judging you.
Absolutely.
I feel like I slipped on that question, and I think what everyone else said was really good. Honestly, I don't think I have anything.
Would you do it again?
Research again?
Travel to Ecuador?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'd love to go see my friends down in Hokotoko. And
I think for me, I mean, like, I already knew this, but I think what Liam said is just like, it kind of like fell into place a little bit more. It was just like my role as a researcher. As like in this project, you're considered like the lead researcher. So technically you're running everything, but also kind of not, because at least in my project, there's so many stakeholders that we kind of had to it was just kind of a challenge trying to figure out how to kind of please and address everybody. So like we have our research objectives and like the paper itself that needs to be due. We have our mentors that we're working with. We have this international organization, AET, that we're working with. And then I'm also working with 2 other students at William & Mary. So like, I think what Liam said as well is like just this emphasis on communication and making sure that everybody is on the same page within the team of researchers, within the team and your mentors, and within the team and the organization that you're working with. Because it can kind of get a little messy in understanding like what everybody wants. Because also everybody sort of wants a different thing or a disparate aspect of what you're researching. So really just understanding your role and how you can best kind of adapt and learn to make sure that you are fulfilling what everybody is wanting from you is something that I really kind of solidified more and more as I through the year.
So yeah, we'll open it up to the audience. Do you all have any questions?
Don't have.
Was there any difficulties with like language barriers?
I think I was talking to, sorry, I just took the question is because I was talking to another student who was asking me applying for the CRP in 2025. And one of the thing is, and as I said, the model we have been working is we have a local team where it was in Nepal and it was also in Cambodia where I learned the lesson is the local team is going to ask most of the questions, right? When we are out in the field, like Liam said, one team has one local member, one American member, and the other team also has the same thing. The students, the patience that the students need to have, sitting there, listening to someone talking in an alien language, it's not easy. So you might think that your time is being wasted. You could have done something different, gone to somewhere in a different place and collected another data, which might be easier, where it does not require any kind of communication. But sitting there and looking at the body language of your respondent is very, very important. And also this is respect that you can give to the person who is responding to you. So language barrier is going to be always how much you try to speak a foreign language, it is going to be different when you go out in the field because the slangs and the accent is going to be way different. Language barrier is always there. I don't know how your experience was, but I always try to focus to the newer applicants is please have that patience to sit there and just listen to what they are trying to say, because after some time you will figure out the response just by looking at their body language. And that is really, really important.
So something for my project, it wasn't a specific language requirement. But we found when we went to the field that a lot of people did not speak English. So I luckily spoke Spanish. But again, I didn't know all the slang, but I kind of took the role. This is another thing being flexible, took the role of like translator. So whenever we'd go out to like look at the trees in the field, like I would like professor would ask me a question and then I would have to translate it in my head and then ask the question in Spanish and then he'd have to give me a response and then I'd have to translate it back into English back to the professor because he didn't speak Spanish. But I actually personally found that like very valuable experience because it was a good way to use my Spanish. Because I think languages in general, like first of all, you need to continue practicing to be able to do well in it, but also you learn the most by doing and by being immersed in the culture. So again, it's a lot easier because I already had a background in Spanish. I think if I was put in Kenya, I don't know any of the local languages, completely different language body. But that is just something in general. Like I think don't like worry if you're going to a completely different place. I never like don't know the language because they usually put you like with a translator or at least someone's gonna have to know. Like you're not gonna be just like completely no communication. So yeah.
One thing I want to add again from one experience is When you are going out there collecting data, and if it has some kind of human interaction, the first thing that we want to develop, we are all science people, right? We want to do very good research. If we want to get good research, we need to have good data. And again, I talked about the biasness part. We are biased towards what we know. Even the respondents are biased towards what they know. They are not going to tell us the real scenario until they are comfortable with us, until they know that we are not going to judge them. Small, these kind of practices like trying to speak their language, even just trying to say hello in front of them in their language. And I am again telling you the real thing, they will laugh. When you try to speak in their language, they will laugh. And it's not to judge you, it's because they are happy that some outsider, and if that person is coming from the US and trying to speak our language, because in one of my field trip, I had 2 students, and in most of these kind of scenarios, we will try to tell them to introduce them. So one student would introduce them in English, and the other student every time used to introduce them in the local language. And people laughed because they were happy. But I think that opens them up, that builds that trust, that builds that comfort, which is very, very much important to get the good data that we are trying to get for our good research. So we need to build that comfort, that trust, and language is going to play the most important role. So at least if you are going to some kind of scenario, research, international scenario, or wherever it is, try to speak their language, try to learn from them, ask them questions, be humble. It just opens up that kind of, the communication.
Really good point. I think at least for the CRP, in all these situations, we've been invited by the partners because they are excited about it and exchange. So learning languages, and then a lot of times, the communities that you're working with and want to also learn maybe English. And so there's a really great way to connect through a sort of exchange of knowledge and stories about your different lives and perspectives. And it's a really great question. Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, mine was the language one as well.
Oh, okay.
I guess I would say, like, do you guys have any horror stories with bugs or leeches or leeches? Am I allowed to say myself? Oh, no.
So like on our
Now we have to film.
Yeah, on our like second day at camp, we all would like every night we would have a bonfire and we'd sit by the fire and just like look at the stars and like have s'mores and stuff. It was really fun. But at like there's like this little firewood part, like little like kind of just big kind of pit of wood that they used to supply the fire, and there was just a little snake sitting under there, and all of us being dumb we're like, oh, it's just a little garden snake. It was like the tiniest little small brown snake, and we were like, it's fine. And then we have like 24/7 security guards, and so one of the guards came over and was like, just started whacking it, and he was like, oh yeah, that's a black mamba, it's extremely deadly. And we were within like 2 feet of it, like it could have easily killed us all. But like we were completely safe. It was fine. In terms of like bugs and stuff, yeah, they were there. I lived with a gecko in my tent for like the entire month. Like,
But that's good. I mean,
yeah. I remember like one day I like turned over and there was just like a couple dead beetles like in my tent. But like it is like it's just bugs. Like there's nothing really too scary about it. The only horror story was like that black mamba. After that though, we were fine. Like no more snakes.
That's, I think, the importance of then after that, making sure you're always wearing shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Just being aware. So
Yeah.
part of your orientation, obviously, with the partners is thinking about safety and prevention, but also recognizing that you can't guarantee safety anywhere. You can't guarantee safety in Williamsburg. So just being really, really aware, as Asha was, of making sure that you're asking partners if you see something, and then just being really aware of how to manage safety. Any leech? Anything else? Anyone want to reflect on that?
I could say that when we were in Kenya last semester, over the summer, I think one of our members, they were infested with bed bugs. And the entire team was staying in the same house. So it became very difficult because, everybody was trying to clean up and all that. But one thing I realized is that, being open and just like handling the problem together really helps, especially when you face such kind of challenges. So we all came together and we did the washing, so we suspended our research, I think on a Friday, decided like we're gonna wash everything in that house. I was staying away, but I just came to help. So it shows that, these things do happen and you just don't know what happened to you, but like how you respond to what happens to you is equally important as an international researcher.
So I think we'll end it here, but obviously we have until 4:30 if you all want to stick around and ask the panelists some one-on-one questions. Please help yourself to more of the pizza and drinks on your way out. I really want to thank our panelists for such thoughtful reflections here and for sharing their own experiences. I think there were some really great takeaways here on, the importance of, reflecting on our own privilege and position. And that is a process, right? Nobody's going to come in with all the knowledge, but it's that openness to the self-reflection and to learning. Another major theme that came out of it is the attitude of gratitude. I think of recognizing this opportunity that we all have, to be invited by partners to come and learn, but also to be supported by William and Mary to have that opportunity. And then just that approach of always learning and engaging and respecting differences. I think also something that I heard the panelists talk about a lot is that mutual respect. So thank you all very much. I'll be around to answer questions about the Conservation Research Program application, any questions you have about any of the projects. And our panelists, if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes so they could ask you questions one-on-one, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Lydia, are you applying?